I mean, in fact, the Bush administration, you have to give them credit, has shown a certain genius in isolating the United States. They have even succeeded in alienating Canada, and that takes real talent. You know, and that's another major oil energy provider. The U.S. just refused to accept NAFTA rulings against the United States in favor of Canada. Well, you know, here, who cares? You know, kick them in the face, kick the UN in the face. That's our job. But the Canadians were not too enthusiastic about it. And the Canadian government, I don't think they're going to implement it, but they did state, Minister of Resources and others, that if the U.S. is not going to follow the rules, they will simply start to shift some of their oil exports from the United States to China, which will be perfectly happy to move in. Well, you know, as I say, that takes a certain genius. You got to admire them. Venezuela is diversifying its economy, its exports. China is very happy to move in and invest, and it's, again, the other resource exporters in South America, primarily Brazil and Chile, are increasing exports to China. Same, incidentally, is happening in the Middle East. As you may have noticed, remember when President Hu visited Washington a couple of weeks ago, the government decided to insult him by not granting him a state dinner. Well, he returned the insult very cordially by leaving from the United States and flying to Saudi Arabia. A real slap in the face to Washington, and a serious one, much more serious than a state dinner, where he firmed up relations which are already pretty strong between China and Saudi Arabia, which is China's now getting a lot of its oil from there. It's investing there. It's even giving them military aid. This is part of the deterioration of Washington's control over the major energy and other resource-rich areas. Latin America is a part of it. You got to look at it in the context of what's happening in the Middle East. It's not unrelated to the threats to invade Iran. In fact, if you look at you take a look closely at the attention given to the Iranian nuclear threat. I mean, it picks up roughly in around August 2003. That's when you start getting a lot of rhetoric about it. And then it continues to increase from then. Well, what was happening then? Take a look. What was happening then was that the U.S. had invaded Iraq. The reason was, as Bush and Blair and Powell repeatedly announced, what they called a single question. Will Saddam Hussein give up his programs of weapons of mass destruction? By the summer of 2003, the question was answered the wrong way. So you had to have something new. And a new pretext came along. That's when the president announced his messianic mission to bring democracy to the world and so on. That was the real reason, you know, weapons of mass destruction we didn't care about. It's our messianic mission to bring democracy, and everybody got on that bandwagon. But you also had to have if it turned out that Iraq is not going to be a stable, dependent client state, you know, kind of an El Salvador, which of course is what they were hoping for, and by then it was pretty clear that's not going to happen. You're going to have some other pretexts to keep military bases there, to build the palace, which is the hugest embassy in the world, and so on, and the other indications of a permanent military presence to control it. Well, you know, one good pretext is you got to protect the world against Iran. And in fact, as Bush's popularity rankings decline, rhetoric about the Iranian threat increases. It was actually pointed out recently in quite a good article in Al-Ahram, the Egyptian journal. But if you look, I think that's pretty accurate. The concern over the nuclear threats becomes visible at about the same time that the democracy promotion rhetoric begins. Both of them responses to the fact that the pretext for invasion had collapsed, and that it was becoming very difficult to control the country and impose a client regime as had been intended, and it increases from there. I think all of these things are related, and what's happening in Latin America is part of this picture.
Sir,